All right, this is Roger Schickadance. I'm filling in for James Cathro today, and would like to call to order this October 21st meeting of the 5th and Avon CAC. And first I'll read the protocols for the meeting. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Liz Palmer, Supervisor, Andrew Baxter, Robert Finley, Sean Bridge, Thomas Thorpe, Roger Schickadance, Karen Davenport, and Craig Roller. Did I miss anyone? The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the 5th and Avon Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. County staff present at this meeting are Carolyn Schaefer, Tim Patalino, Tucker Rollins, and Tori Kanelopoulos. Okay, the first order of business is to address meeting minutes from the August meeting, actually. And I received comments from Karen Davenport. The two substantive comments were adding the day of the month, and she added her name to the list of attendees. I think all the rest of the comments were grammatical clarifications or corrections, so I won't go through those individually. Are there any other comments on the minutes? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Accepted.
Second.
Okay. Vote to accept the minutes. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, the minutes are adopted as amended. First up, we have a presentation on the Biscuit Run Park from Tim Patalino and Tucker Rollins. So I'll give the presentation over to them.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Schickadance. I'll go ahead and just get my slides pulled up here. Should take just a moment. That's full screen. So is everybody seeing these slides okay right now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so good evening, everybody. It's great to be with the CAC tonight and with the general public. As introduced, my name is Tim Patalino. I'm the Chief of Parks Planning for Albemarle County, and I'll let Tucker introduce himself.
Yeah, unmute myself here. My name's Tucker Rollins, and I'm the Trail Maintenance Supervisor for Albemarle County Parks.
Thanks, Tucker. And we've been asked to prepare a presentation tonight. I guess we have about 45 minutes on the agenda. I think we could have condensed this down to a really brief conversation or expanded it into a more comprehensive overview, and we did the latter. So we've got quite a lot of information tonight, and we'll try to move pretty quickly to leave space and time for discussion and questions and answers. I did just want to begin by saying, Tucker and I and everyone at Parks and Rec love all things outdoors, and we are proud to serve Albemarle County through the Parks and Recreation Department. We take the stewardship and the management of the county's parks and greenways seriously, and we recognize how important this responsibility is. So as reflected in our vision and our mission statement, we are always trying to balance environmental stewardship and conservation with outdoor recreation and achieving, goals in both of those areas at the same time in everything that we do. And I do just want to give some structure to tonight's presentation, since there is a lot of content. We're moving through those introductory comments, and then we'll have a sort of background or introductory overview of Biscuit Run Park. I know that the CAC members are all familiar with Biscuit Run, but knowing that this is a public presentation, it's being recorded, will be available online, it seems important to give some context and some background for any folks who may still be learning about this park property. And then we'll spend a good amount of time with status updates for different park projects that are ongoing. And then briefly touch on some park planning information about future phases and future activities. And again, we'll leave time for discussion and questions and answers. So let's jump into the overview. Again, I think everybody's aware on this call, but for informational purposes, the location of Biscuit Run Park, as you can see here, is in the southern and western development areas of the county, and actually the southern portions of the park property are in the rural areas. And so I think it's the county's only park that actually straddles those two different comprehensive planning area boundaries. As far as park property ownership and management, this is a 1,190 acre property as recently surveyed by Marsh and Lead land surveyors. This has recently been surveyed and recorded. I'm going to approximate that to 1,200 acres throughout this conversation. But as you can see here, Albemarle County does not own Biscuit Run Park property. It's actually owned by the Commonwealth of Virginia under the care of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR. But the county has entered a 99-year lease with DCR to develop and manage the park property for the public benefit and for environmental stewardship. And as you can see, park boundary signs have been installed all around the perimeter of these 1,200 acres. I think Tucker has a good story or two to share about all of that work with him and his crew and surveyors and some of the state folks as well. But this partnership with DCR led to a joint master planning process. First, it was planned as a state park in 2013, and then after that lease was executed, planned as a county park. You can see here in 2018, the final park master plan was reviewed by the Board of Supervisors at a public hearing and adopted with DCR's endorsement or blessing. So again, it won't be a state park, it will be a new county park. And the park will be developed and managed in accord with this, this portion of the park master plan. I recognize this isn't fully legible at your scale on your screen. We probably don't have time tonight to go into this as part of the presentation. If time allows and if there's interest, maybe we can circle back to this master plan. But just wanted to highlight that it exists, and that's how we are managing and planning to develop the park in accord with that adopted document. I'm going to move into current status of the park, and I think as everybody is aware, the future Biscuit Run Park is not open to the general public at this time. And I think it's important just to touch on the reasons why that is. And they all have to do either with resource management or with public safety. So in terms of the park's resources, there are no county staff performing routine maintenance like cleanup or trail maintenance. And there's no bathrooms or other developed facilities for visitors. We're just not ready for folks to come in yet. And in terms of public safety, there's no signage and there are no maps in a large, relatively wild and undeveloped landscape. And there's incomplete cell phone coverage. So it's really just not a good situation to allow the public in when there's no ability to really respond effectively and efficiently to any accidents that may happen. It really complicates any potential rescue operations. So public safety, resource management, for these reasons, the park is not open to the general public at this time. I also want to touch on some of the park's characteristics and the existing conditions of the park property. And I think it's important just to at least acknowledge and touch on the fact that Biscuit Run stream corridor and the surrounding upland areas were traditionally used by the Monacan Indian Nation as hunting grounds. And in more recent history, in the 19th and 20th centuries, there was extensive agricultural use of these lands. And what's interesting is those land uses over a century and several decades ago has resulted in today's current community types in terms of the forest composition and the different land cover patterns. So these images kind of reflect that reality. These were prepared by Anhold Associates, Landscape Architecture and Planning, as part of the Park Master Plan process a few years ago. But what's interesting is you can see in this historic and cultural resources inventory, overlaid on top of a 1937 aerial photograph, you can see the areas that were open to pasture. You can see areas that remained forested. And you can also see some of the farm roads and field roads that crisscross this landscape on the left. And then on the right, in terms of this natural heritage resource analysis, you can see the corresponding old growth hardwood forests in the central portion of the park, in the western portion, and then almost all of the southern portion of the park is older growth hardwood forest. And then there's other successional plant communities in different varieties where agriculture had been taking place. A quick note about existing conditions. Some of these farm roads and field roads are currently in use as sort of informal trails. We do acknowledge and understand that. Some of the field roads are kind of lost under the duff and are not readily apparent if you're out there. But some of these are clearly visible, and we plan to develop the trail system to utilize these existing transportation corridors to kind of help people move through the landscape in ways that they would have a century or more ago. We estimate there's probably between 9 and 10 miles of existing trails just in the central and northern portions of the park. As far as other existing conditions, this park is undeveloped, and so it's existing now as a green infrastructure resource. It's a predominantly forested land cover, and that's effectively a carbon sink that's purifying the air and sequestering carbon dioxide in ways that support the county's climate action plan goals. In that way, it's also extensive wildlife habitat and a green infrastructure core, which supports the county's biodiversity action plan goals as well. And this forested landscape with lots of tributaries and waterways is providing, water resource protection and cleaning our water, which supports the Stream Health Initiative goals for the county's rural areas. We do want to also acknowledge some ongoing challenges. As we know, there's no public access, no developed facilities, and this is resulting in some unauthorized parking on private properties or within public rights of way. And the county has taken action this year to address and resolve some of the unauthorized parking. For example, at Mill Creek South along Stony Creek Drive, that had been one of the most popular boundary access points, as you can see by this image provided by Steve Olson. And even folks sliding off the embankment and getting stuck, having to get pulled out or towed out. So a real big problem for folks living in Mill Creek South. And this was resolved through a fair amount of collaboration between multiple county departments and VDOT. And so some signage and other improvements have taken place to address this situation. In a very different vein, we know that the park is home to a lot of invasive species. They are abundant in some areas, and they are spreading. And you can see some examples here. It's just kind of the usual suspects of what you would expect. And we see this as an urgent need for collaboration and volunteer participation to begin managing this in the near future. And in fact, that's one of the required outcomes of our lease with the state, with DCR, is to plan for and implement invasive species management. So switching gears from kind of an overview and introductory information to updates on park status. The main thing to bring to your attention is the most up-to-date status of phase 1A of park development. Again, I think there's some familiarity with this, but for clarity's sake, the proposed entrance to the park will be on Route 20 on Scottsville Road, about 500 feet south of Avon Street Extended intersection. And this is actually a sheet from the final site plan. It shows how there would be the new commercial entrance. There would be turn lanes for northbound and southbound traffic on Route 20. And this would accommodate 75 vehicles and include some bathrooms and passive recreation facilities. And I want to show this additional sheet from the final site plan because this is a good illustration of what the trailhead area would actually look like. This is from the landscape plan. I'm not sure how well you can see my cursor, but basically there's a really thoughtful design behind this from Anhold Associates. And that would be to recreate something of a hedgerow along the edge of the parking lot and entrance and kind of mimic the agricultural heritage of the site. And then in the same vein, there would be landscaping and trees planted on a grid to kind of emulate the type of orchard that would have been present here in past times. So I really like how thoughtful this site plan is from a design perspective, but also from a functionality perspective, and making a lot of things happen on a pretty constrained site. So this phase 1A is the initial phase of all of the planned park development. It's important because it would finally establish sanctioned public access into the park property. And it's one of the county's top strategic plan goals as identified by the Board of Supervisors. And that's apparent in that this is a fully funded project through the county's capital improvements program. The budget is about $2.1 million. And the final site plan and related documents have been reviewed and accepted by DCR at the state level. And that's required by the terms of the property lease and the corresponding memorandum of understanding. And the final site plan and related documents are currently under review through the Community Development Department and also under review by VDOT. So ACPR is actively working with the consultant team, including Anhold Associates and Woolley Engineering, and working with other county departments to address and resolve some outstanding review comments on the final site plan and road plans and water protection ordinance plan. So project completion and the opening is estimated for late summer or early fall 2022. The project schedule may potentially be adjusted depending on this site plan process and resolving some of those outstanding review comments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tucker. He's going to touch on some of the trail planning activities, some of the trail construction and maintenance efforts, and then also our park development partnership with a local club.
Okay, hey everybody. I'm Tucker Rollins, the County Parks Trail Maintenance Supervisor. And so what we've been doing out there for the last year and a half has been to evaluate all of the existing trails, which I believe there's about 9 or 10 miles of existing trail. And we've tried to figure out which of those trails we can keep and adopt into our future trail system, which trails we need to close and get rid of, and which trails we'll need to reroute to make them more sustainable. And we're doing that in accordance with the park master plan and, you know, kind of overlaying that on top of the existing trails. We're also thinking about where we will need kiosks. We're doing some trail mapping and we're thinking about the signage that we'll need to have in place. So as we're doing that and we're doing our trail planning, what we're hoping to create is a trail system that will make lots of different users happy. You know, we're expecting lots of hikers, trail runners, mountain bikers, bird watchers, native plant folks. So we're trying to create something that will allow all these different types of people to get in there and spread out and be happy. In the past, at other parks like Pretty Creek or Byram Forest, we've used a formula of 1 trail mile per 35 acres. And I think we figured that out to be at the final build out with 1,200 acres, that would allow us to have 30 to 35 miles of trail out there. And we feel like that creates a good balance between recreation and conservation. You know, we don't want to over trail it and build too many trails where it becomes a confusing trail system. And you know, you have trails that are too close together. So one person might start cutting through one trail, creating a social network of trails. And also we want to leave some big chunks of wildlife habitat and green space. And we feel like that 1 mile per 35 acres allows us to do that. Tim mentioned that we have been working with a local community group in Cambic, the Charlottesville Albemarle Mountain Bike Club. You can see on the screen there, that's kind of our phase 1 and phase 2 of the trail networking plan. But what we are working on right now is the first main multi-use loop. You might want to go back a slide, Tim, and show them that bold, the more bold black outline that connects to the parking lot.
There it is.
Yeah. So we've already completed, I'd say, 2/3 of that. And we're hoping to have that opened, at least that opened by the grand opening next fall. And I'm pretty confident we can do that. I think we'll have that open and then some more stuff on the ground too. But Tim mentioned that we've been working with Cambic, the mountain bike club, and eventually there will be 2 designated mountain bike areas at Biscuit Run. And we've started, we're in the planning phases of the first designated mountain bike area. And it's kind of a small, it's not an overly large space, but it will have, I think, like 5 to 7 downhill trails that'll be downhill kind of slalom-like mountain bike trails with some small jumps, not like big gap jumps, but smaller like tabletop jumps, with 2 return trails that will take the mountain bikers from the bottom of the hill back up to the top of the hill. And I think it also includes a small pump track area, which is a kind of a small space that will allow young kids to develop mountain bike skills without getting too far out onto the trails with other more advanced mountain bikers. And then eventually there'll be a second mountain bike area further out in the park that will be more a bigger space, but designed for like flow trails. But yeah, we've been working closely with Cambic. They're actually going to fund the build out of that first designated mountain bike area. They've also hosted some volunteer days for us to help get that first main loop in place. And then we also have hosted a couple volunteers with some UVA student groups. I think that just about covered everything. Can you think of anything else, Tim, as far as the trail building and trail planning?
No, I think that's great, Tucker. I think the only other thing we could emphasize is that these single-use areas are identified in the adopted park master plan. There's benefits to that in terms of kind of not restricting mountain bikers to those zones, but allowing them space to have kind of the full use of those trails. It might help reduce the number of folks on the other multi-use trails. It might help reduce any potential conflicts between different trail type users. And it allows them to have kind of specialized trails and other features that wouldn't be appropriate just anywhere in the park. So it seems like a really good balance of kind of accommodating a specialized use, but not at the exclusion or detriment of other park users.
Good point.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, well, a couple other status updates, and then we'll move into the next section. I did want to mention that there's a project for stream restoration within the Biscuit Run Park property. This is not a Parks and Recreation project per se. It's actually being led by Albemarle County's Facilities and Environmental Services Department, but Parks is on that team to kind of help, guide and develop that planning process. We're also working on that with a private consumer services And they've completed an assessment of existing stream conditions for Biscuit Run and the tributaries. And they've kind of inventoried and assessed other characteristics of the park property. You can see here they've done some of that for wetlands and streams, and many other attributes or characteristics. They've also prepared a constraints and opportunities analysis technical report and are working to finalize a second technical report on how to prioritize stream restoration projects that would be the most beneficial and the most impactful, according to many different criteria. And they're eventually going to come up with a final Biscuit Run restoration master plan, which will be an invaluable resource to guide the county's future restoration activities and just generally strengthen the county's future efforts to obtain restoration funding through grants or other sources. And next, just a couple updates on some park planning projects that actually extend beyond the property's boundaries and try to connect the park into existing residential areas and commercial or mixed use areas. So the first thing to touch on is the planned Biscuit Run Connector Greenway. Albemarle County is engaged in ongoing attempts to acquire a public greenway easement across privately owned open spaces or common areas. I think it's no secret that's with Mill Creek Homeowners Association and Foxcroft Homeowners Association. This is a long planned greenway connection that would certainly provide safe, convenient bicycle and pedestrian connectivity between Biscuit Run Park and 5th Street Station, the existing Rivanna trails along Moores Creek and beyond, as well as the city of Charlottesville. There's an ongoing process. As I said, it's been 2+ years in the works on this easement coordination and negotiation process, and that's between the HOAs of Mill Creek and Foxcroft and the designated county team. I'm the parks planner for the county. I'm not actually on that greenway coordination team, but I understand there's an interest in sort of bringing renewed focus and momentum to that coordination process. And we certainly welcome that. And one of the reasons why there needs to be renewed emphasis and focus on that is because of another project just to the north, which is the 5th Street Trails Hub. This is a fully funded project as of 2021 through the VDOT Smart Scale process. I think you all may be somewhat familiar with this already, but I do want to highlight it. It's a total project cost of almost $10 million. And it may seem like a huge price tag, but when you look at the project scope, and when you consider that these trails and bridges and other improvements would actually be designed and built to transportation standards and specifications, it begins to explain the cost. I think the right-of-way acquisitions and the utility relocations also drive the project cost up very quickly. But essentially, this would be providing new 10-foot wide shared use paths along multiple portions of Moores Creek and include a connection from Moores Creek up to 5th Street Station, connecting in near Wegmans. You can see where, because of the slope and the amount of grade change between the floodplain and 5th Street Station, there would need to be a few switchbacks to gain that elevation and to maintain a 5% maximum grade. And just to emphasize, this would also include 2 new 14-foot wide bike ped bridges across Moores Creek, one upstream of the confluence with Biscuit Run, and then a second just below the confluence with Biscuit Run. And the county does presently have greenway easements to the south. And you can just see Interstate 64 here. So that would be the next property to obtain right-of-way permissions across. We've begun that process with VDOT, but haven't finished acquiring what's called a land use permit for permission to develop trail and provide public access underneath 64.
Tim, can I ask a question on that real quick?
Yes, absolutely, Supervisor Palmer.
Can you hear me? Could you go back to that last slide,
Yes.
please? So I'm just a little bit confused. Where do the people park now to get in there next to Wegmans and take the trail down the hill with the switchbacks. Could you just point out where, I mean, is this the existing, this one that you show with the switchbacks? Where exactly, which one is Wegmans and where are the people parking now? I know it's on the side of Wegmans, but I'm just confused on the map.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And this exhibit does not do a great job of providing context, at least with Fifth Street Station. Wegmans would be just off of the bottom of the exhibit over here. And so folks are parking kind of along this aisle, I think, just generally speaking. And there is an existing trail here that's been improved, but it is not what is shown on this exhibit. This would be a more formal connection. There would be fairly significant grading and some significant retaining walls, again, to kind of accommodate that grade change at a 5% grade. So this would be a modification and pretty much a total rebuild of that trail system from Fifth Street Station down to the Creekside trails.
Okay, and so that property where the switchback right now is that we have an easement there or we own that, the county?
It's one of those two. I'm on the spot and I forget if it's fee simple ownership or easement.
Okay. I could look it up online, but I just haven't ever done that. Okay. All right. Thank you. And so, and that would connect to that existing trail that goes under 64 and right to Biscuit Run now, which we have an easement for the rest of the way, the one that people are using right now to get into Biscuit Run from this switchback. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, there's public control or ownership from the edge of this parking lot down the hill and then all the way going, I guess that's upstream or south towards 64. And then it's Federal Highway Administration right of way at that point.
Gotcha.
And then Foxcroft and then Mill Creek and then Biscuit Run Park.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the questions. So this is kind of a wrap-up slide in terms of park status. These are kind of just closing remarks or reminders that Biscuit Run Park is not open to the general public for those reasons I identified earlier relating to resource management and protection and public safety. We just want to emphasize that unauthorized trail building is strictly prohibited, especially since it's not open to the public at this time, but authorized park development and authorized trail building activities are happening and are underway. So please, we need the public to not remove flags or stakes or other surveying or planning equipment or materials. Please do not remove county signage. And please do not reopen trail corridors that have been closed by park staff for reroutes or other modifications. Those things are being done with sustainability and with user experience in mind. And so some of the recent trail closures are deliberate and we'd like those to be re-educated. And of course, do not open new trail corridors, kind of as a point of emphasis there. So finally, I can share some park planning info. These are a little bit more brief. As far as developing future partnerships or strengthening existing partnerships, we need to build a team and have a plan around invasive species management. There's been some talk of an invasive species task force, and I think there's going to be more focus put towards that this fall and moving into winter. Additional trail network development and greenway connections. Partnership and collaboration with Habitat for Humanity in Southwood as they begin plans for developing the next phase and future blocks of their redevelopment. We want to make sure those include trail connections to increase equitable access. And actually, as part of their phase 1 development, through a partnership with Community Development Department and the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, the county has received a large amount of CDBG or Community Development Block Grant funding. And part of that money will go towards developing Monacan Nation Park inside of Southwood, which will be publicly accessible. And the county, including Parks and Rec, will have a role to play in the park planning and development and maintenance. And we are going to work with the Office of Equity and Inclusion to make sure that the Monacan Indian Nation is actually engaged in that park planning and design process. It's really to celebrate and acknowledge their heritage and their history and their culture. So obviously we can't do that without them. And then finally, at 5th Street Station, I showed you the 5th Street Trails Hub project. There's also some other obligations or opportunities in the proffers related to the 5th Street Station rezoning that would provide more trailhead amenities. That could be signage or other park-like amenities that would help people transition from, you know, the commercial experience into the recreational experience. And then finally, I just want to touch on some future park planning phases or projects. I want to just clarify these are currently unfunded, but they are included within the park master plan. So some of our areas of focus for future phases include expanding and enhancing the trail network. We're going to need to have bridges that cross streams and other waterways to provide access to portions of the park that are currently inaccessible. We're obviously going to have to expand the multi-use trail network and build and maintain additional miles of trail. And we want bridges and trail connections to and through the surrounding neighborhoods. A second major emphasis or focus area is the development of an athletic fields complex. It would require an extension of the park access road, extensive parking. It would include 4 athletic fields with lighting and bathrooms and similar park facilities and amenities. And the third future focus is a maintenance building. And this would accommodate the management and maintenance services and equipment for Biscuit Run Park itself, but also be the countywide headquarters for Tucker's Trails Crew, which currently does not have a kind of home base or a center of operation. So that concludes all of the planned remarks. I think we still have a decent amount of time for discussion or questions and answers. I'll leave this slide up for a few moments, so if anybody wants to jot down our contact information, you can feel free to contact Tucker or I at any time. But at this point, I'll stop sharing and we can just have a discussion for the rest of this agenda item.
Hi, can I ask a question?
I'm going to watch for raised hands in the chat.
In the chat.
And so I'll try and go in order. Karen, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate all you've done to get a lot of these cars. I live on Stony Creek Drive. So I appreciate whatever you did to get a lot of these cars out of here. Thank you. You've got talk about bike trails. Are they initially they were talking about equestrian trails? You going to have any equestrian trails in there?
Yeah, great question. I believe the park master planning process includes equestrian trails.
Cool. That's cool.
It definitely did during the state park master planning process, which preceded this, current master plan.
Hey, Tim, I think they got rid of that. I think they nixed the equestrian trails because the state master plan or one of the state guidelines showed they said that we had to have equestrian trails that were separate from other multi-use trails. So I think the newer master plan does not include equestrian trails. I think they thought that would just be too much to build mountain biking, hiking, and horseback riding trails.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that catch, Tucker. Clarification.
Do you know what the setback is going to be? I mean, from say Stony Creek Drive, the only thing that worries me is the athletic fields and the lighting and all the people and all that noise and stuff. What's the back going to be? I mean, the setback from say Stony Creek back. What is there a barrier there? Like,
it would be, I don't have a dimension, but it would be a significant distance from Mill Creek South and Stony Creek Drive.
okay.
As I just revealed with my equestrian answer, I wasn't a part of that park master planning process when the county did that a few years ago. But I do know that the athletic complex and everything was cited to be as far away as possible from existing residential areas, and be sited in a way that kind of allowed most of the park to remain intact without, deforestation or grading. So kind of concentrating those uses and those impacts close to Route 20 and close to the entrance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I can just add that there was quite a bit of conversation at the time, since I was there, about making sure that the athletic fields were as far away as possible from the residential areas. So.
So I will start calling on people in the order that I think I saw the hands. Tom, I believe you were first.
Okay, thanks. Nice job, Tucker, Tim. A lot of work went into that, and I think this is going to be really terrific when you're done. Quick question, forgive me if I missed it. So on the mountain bikes, there'll be some shared areas, probably following some sort of courtesy protocol or something like that, but there'll be shared bike and walking?
You want me to answer that, Tim?
Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, I think pretty much all of the trails will be multi-use, meaning hiking.
Okay.
But then we will have two designated mountain bike areas that will be mountain bike only. And the hope for that is that that'll help to keep some of the mountain bikers off of the other trails.
Yeah, and we're kind of planning that in partnership with Canbic, the Charlottesville Area Mountain Bike Club, and they're an IMBA affiliate program, International Mountain Bike Association. They have really thoughtful approaches to this and are really engaging like professional trail builders, some of the local mountain bike experts and enthusiasts. And I think to your question, we will make sure that there's clear signage as far as how those single-use areas should be accessed or not. We don't want people cutting in from all different angles, as Tucker was kind of alluding to earlier in the presentation. So a thoughtful signage program and a clear entry and exit point for those single-use areas. All of those things are still in the works, but we know they're important. And
No, I've seen it work well. I've seen it work well. Great, thanks.
All right, Craig, I believe you're next.
Yeah, sorry my video is not working, but I guess I had two questions sort of unrelated. One, what is the status at one point, and I think on your maps it still showed a landlocked parcel that's not part of the park. What's the status of that? And then I'm also curious if SACA and other athletic organizations bear any of the maintenance and or construction costs of the athletic fields.
Well, those are good questions. To the first question, that's a privately in-held parcel. I think it's 38 acres. That there are no plans for any change in ownership or change in use or management or anything. That family, the Breeden family, maintains a right of way to access their property through the park. But that's kind of the extent of that arrangement. We would be sure to have signage that kind of indicates, staying on trails, staying off of private property when that western portion of the park, becomes open to the public and developed with trails and other improvements. And the second question was about potential cost sharing with user groups like SACA or other clubs, organizations. I don't think we've gotten anywhere near that type of detail with that future phase. I don't have clear information on that one for you, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks. Good information.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, Supervisor Palmer.
Thank you. So I didn't quite catch how many parking spaces are in there is my first question on this initial parking lot.
Yeah, phase 1A will have 75 spaces.
75. And I don't know if you have records or if you've looked at airplane shots or anything like that, but when you talk about old growth forest, When was that logged last? Like the 50s or do you guys know?
Well, that's a good question. The UVA image library, which is where I got those historic aerials from, they go back to 1937 for this portion of Albemarle County. And the areas that Anhold Associates mapped as older growth hardwood forests were always vegetated, whether it was the maps from 37 or the 1950s and 60s and 80s and, you know, to present day. So I don't think we should consider them true old growth, like ancient, you know, kind of unbroken.
No, we don't have any of that.
Yeah, but older growth, it was kind of a creative term they used. And I think that's right. It goes back probably at least 80 years, if not more, for those particular areas. And what's crazy is how quickly the successional communities have gone from pasture to, you know, cedar thickets and other plant communities. It's happened within just 10 or 12 or 15 years.
Okay, and my last question, I'm remembering this from bad times when the city was discussing Ragged Mountain Reservoir. Of course, we're still in court over that whole thing, but there's a lot of mountain bikes using those trails now, and the city council talked a lot about not allowing dogs there because they somehow weren't compatible with bikes. And I've always found dogs perfectly okay with mountain bikes on trails. So I just want to make sure that there's no discussion about excluding dogs from these areas. So make me feel happy and tell me there's none. Has there been any discussion along these?
As a dog owner, do you want to take that one, Tucker?
Yeah, there's been no discussion of, as long as your dog's on a leash, you can take him to Biscuit Run.
Great. Well, not now, right? But
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm a dog lover too.
Okay, Rob.
So, well, as Tim said, the HOAs have been in discussion about this Biscuit Run Greenway access trail for quite a while. In fact, having been on the board of directors for the Mill Creek HOA and actually current president of the board, some of these discussions actually go back 3.5 years. The most intense discussions, I would say, have started in April of 2019, following a meeting of the membership of the homeowners within Mill Creek. And since that time, I've been sort of in my current role as president of the board of Mill Creek HOA, kind of been the lead negotiator and discussion person, if you will, with county staff. The bottom line at this point is that whole process is basically dead in the water. We have gone through multiple drafts of an easement. We've looked and discussed a lot of provisions with the county's representatives over this period of time, most intensely in the last 2 years or so. We most recently submitted our most detailed comments in November of 2020. And we received a number of one-line replies in February of 2021. And that was the last dialogue that took place with the county. Most of this has been done by email and some telephone calls, which probably has not been the most satisfactory way to do it. The last element of proposal that the Mill Creek HOA board offered to the county was we requested to at least have a virtual meeting with county staff and our board, and with Foxcroft being involved, since obviously they're involved in half of this greenway between 5th Street Station and Biscuit Run Park. The county refused our offer to have a virtual meeting. They weren't interested in doing that. And as I said, this was in February of this year. So since that point in time, not much really has happened. We've been as the Mill Creek Board, by and large, is in favor of this. There are a number of key provisions. I won't go into all the details here unless you really want to know about them, that we feel would protect the homeowners and at the same time offer this land to the county for the public benefit. There's some 40 acres that the Mill Creek HOA owns as common open land that is directly behind a number of the residences, including my own. And we feel this would be a great amenity to offer the public. However, certain basic assurances that we asked the county for that we felt were pretty reasonable in terms of, for example, trail rules and so forth, have basically that request has not resonated with the county. So I would just mention to the committee as a whole that there remains a lot of work to be done to actually accomplish this. And furthermore, there needs to be a lot of coordination with Foxcroft, which we have asked for, which really the county has not taken place. Most of these discussions and detailed consideration of easement provisions has been going on between Mill Creek and the county over the last 2 years or so. And there has not been a coordinated effort on the part of the county to get together with both HOAs and to look at those issues in a coordinated way. So I want the committee to recognize that at this point in time, there's a fair amount of frustration among the HOAs because we have this major county park, we have this major investment in the trail hub, yet the county doesn't seem to be able to move into a position of even having the willingness to have a virtual meeting with us to address these issues. And we think that's rather unfortunate. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Probably not a good place to go into details, but I do want folks to know that right now, this is kind of at a stalemate. We've had some recent good, an informal meeting with Peter Krebs and Rex Linville of Piedmont Environmental Council. I think their involvement will be beneficial in trying to get this process off of dead center and move forward. And we are looking forward to that. But we're also looking forward to a more constructive engagement on the county's part. And we certainly hope that would happen. So I just be happy to answer any questions if they exist on that point. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I don't know that we should necessarily open it up to that discussion tonight. But if there's someone that has an urgent question, raise your hand. I'm going to go on to Andrew, and then we'll come back to Rob's discussion if we need to.
Thank you. Tim and Tucker, thanks for the presentation. That's outstanding work. Really appreciate a lot of information. And as a trail runner who lives in Foxcroft, I can't wait. And I'll be riding my mountain bike with my dog on a leash. So there. And I would ride a horse if they would do that as well too. It's unfortunate that's not going to be able to happen, but I understand why. But my questions, sort of going back to an early part of the presentation when you mentioned the historic and cultural elements that you highlighted there. I'm curious, is there a space for a requirement first, and then is there a space for an opportunity for archaeological work as this park is developed?
Yeah, good question. I believe some such report was completed before the state even acquired the property.
Okay.
Through sale. The image I showed was a very high level synthesis of a lot of different information that is already completed and out there. It may be that if we're doing a more significant infrastructure project, like a larger bridge, a road building project, we may need to do that type of archaeological work.
Okay.
But none of the work that we're kind of currently engaged in or able to do now is kind of triggering any required test pits or any digs or anything like that.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
So just to put maybe a finer point on that, as a team at Parks and Rec and as an organization at the county, we obviously cherish our heritage, our history, and want to be really good stewards of the cultural resources, not only the natural resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Sort of switching gears, my next question is really more about the impact of the pandemic on the economy and certain industries. And do you anticipate, given your timeline of late summer, early fall completion, any challenges with material acquisition and or costs vis-a-vis the budget that you have?
That's a great question. We have not to date, maybe in part because there's not a lot of lumber and timber specified. It's mostly road building activities and parking lot, trailhead. That's not been raised either by our project management team and FES or by our consultants. But it's a great thing to kind of bear in mind. And, we're actually just trying to get through the regulatory entitlement is kind of our current focus, making sure we can address and resolve these like site plan review comments, in a good and successful way.
Mm-hmm. And last question real quick, the mountain bike amenities sound terrific. And I know there's a lot of activity at the high school level, both in public and private schools in this area with competitive teams and also the club, obviously. Is this the type of facility that will be able to support racing? And you don't have, I mean, it may be too early to answer that question.
Well, I invite Tucker in here too, but the downhill skills park would have sidewinder trails, which are kind of very brief, one-on-one, basically races. As far as a longer race course, I'm not sure that we've kind of contemplated that or have heard that from Canvas yet.
We're not building the trails in such a way that would we're not thinking about races in the future, but I will say that there have been mountain bike races at Walnut Creek, and so I don't see why there couldn't be a mountain bike race there. At Walnut Creek, we've hosted some out there where it's just like an early morning thing, and they set up the race course, and then it's over and done before most of the park visitors even get there. I don't see why we couldn't host something like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your presentation. It's terrific.
You're welcome.
Roger, I do see, it looks like Peter Krebs in the attendee list has his hand raised. So I think Carolyn should be able to unmute him and let him ask a question.
Hey, thank you, Tori. Have all the CAC members had a chance to speak? I would like to defer to them if.
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. You can go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So, and thank you all for letting me be here. And Tim, what an amazing presentation. I'd love to share this out when it's done. And related to that also, I think folks will be interested to see that stream and wetland analysis report. The little bit I saw looks very intriguing, so thank you. I just wanted to emphasize what a couple of people have said, that I think it would be really well for the county to, and the HOAs to restart their negotiations and working together simultaneously with Foxcroft and Mill Creek is the way to go, because otherwise it's a real chicken or the egg thing. The trail doesn't make sense for either unless it includes both of them. Work collaboratively and in a spirit of like together solving an important public priority and bring a benefit for all county residents. This isn't like working with a developer or some kind of adversarial thing. Also, I hope that the funding for the future phases does begin to show up in the county's funding pipeline, because it's not, the county has a good long range way of working on things. So it would be great to see this long-term priority at least show up on the conveyor belt in the future. That would be important. And then lastly, just as an aside, I wanted to say that if it could be made to work with the state, it would be nice to be able to allow equestrian users. It works great at Preddy, and it also works great at Pleasant Grove. You know, and it, for me, it's about just allowing the maximum number of users in the park. We want to have, you know, everyone from toddlers to people on horses, people on bikes, people running, you know, people, I don't know, hula hooping. That's all. Thank you so much, and a great presentation.
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to say a couple of things. Rob, I feel your frustration, and if there's something that you think the CAC could do to help further things along, possibly we could craft a resolution. We might need a little time to prepare that in order to have it to vote on the next meeting. I'm thinking that maybe if you had a document of issues that you're trying to negotiate with the county that you're willing to share with our group, that might help us understand a little bit better why things have not moved forward. But I'll leave that up to you.
Well, if I may say, I think I appreciate the thought, Roger. I think it's relevant. As Peter said, and as I mentioned, we did have a good meeting with Foxcroft HOA and Peter and Rex. I think I would like to see that play out a little bit. I'd like to, this restart that Peter referred to, I think is important. It's unfortunate that neither Donna nor Rick are here tonight, since they've been involved in this process, as I think Supervisor Palmer knows, for quite a long time. And there may be some comments there, but I would perhaps, Roger, like to hold off on that. You know, we're sort of a small meeting here tonight. I would like to see where this restart goes first, and try and keep, you know, because there are some really, I guess, detailed, almost legalistic issues that need to be addressed. It would be hard to, I mean, I think we at Mill Creek certainly appreciate, and I'm sure everybody here would like to see this Greenway accomplished, because you've got two major centers of activity. One, of course, is the park, and the other is the investment in the trail hub. And I think they're unique in the county. And I would defer to Supervisor Palmer's thoughts on that process. We would really like to see it go forward. I think, and I would suggest, Roger, that we'd like to try and engage with the county in this restart and see where that goes for a while, and then perhaps report back to the committee at some future time when we've kind of gotten off the dead center that we seem to be on at the current point in time. So thanks for the thought, but let's defer it if you would.
Okay, sounds good.
I can say one thing. I obviously can't say much, but I can say that Robert has given a good explanation of the situation. They are legalistic issues left over, and the board has been briefed on this. And so the entire Board of Supervisors is aware of these issues. And thank you, Robert, for giving a pretty good overview of the process to date. And thanks, Tim and Tucker. That was a good presentation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks.
I do just have a couple more quick comments. One was I saw the plans that were on the county website a few months ago, and I'm assuming that included a phase 2 in those plans, because they showed a bathroom facility next to the parking lot. And I had noted at the time that it was a pretty basic utilitarian building, I believe concrete block or something similar. And that would be a great opportunity to get UVA architecture students involved to come up with some creative design for that. And then the other point I wanted to make, which I've brought up before is that I have a concern as an adjacent property owner about maintaining dark sky over that part of the county. The stars were beautiful one day this week, and I hate to see the athletic fields disrupting that with lighting. So I know that the comprehensive plan is being revisited and that dark skies is going to be a part of that. And so I just urge everyone involved to keep that in mind. So with that, I'm going to close out this part of the discussion. Thanks, Tim and Tucker. And we'll go on to updates from our supervisor, Palmer.
Okay. All right. I'll just go right over the agenda. I think most of you probably know about the cigarette tax and that issue, but we did have a public hearing on that, and we approved going forward with that. And for anybody that has not read about that, we are doing that with the TJPDC, and they have got, they're forming the Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board, and that right at present is going to have, let me see my list. Charlottesville is thinking about doing it, but they have not decided for sure. But Augusta, Fluvanna, Greene, Nelson, and Orange counties have agreed to join. And Madison is considering it, as I said, along with the city of Charlottesville. And we're talking about a 40-cent tax on a pack of cigarettes, but it's liable to end up a little bit weird because everybody is deciding their own tax, which I would have thought it would be better if we all did the same thing, but that's not the way it's going to turn out. Other things that we did, we got a report on the regional jail facility assessment, and they're in the midst of doing that. It's an old, very old and out of date, and requires a lot of upgrading. And we don't have a price on that, but it's going to be big. And the state will reimburse us about 25% of that. So that's in the works. But it was an interesting discussion about how old that facility is and how little it's got for the prisoners. And they're also working pretty hard on trying to have alternatives to incarceration, like excuse me, I keep him home with the monitors on the. Excuse me. Probably the big thing that is, I might not be able to do this because I've got something in my throat. Let me get a cough drop really quick, and you guys talk about something else for just a second.
I have a couple of updates. One is that there was a real estate disclosure form that went out, at least to the members who've been reappointed. I'm not sure if it went out to everyone, whether that happens yearly or not. It was worded in an odd way where it has to be returned between January 1st and February 1st, apparently. And I clarified with Claudette Borgerson, the clerk, that she would like those returns now, that there's no reason to hold on to those till January. So if anyone has one of those forms, please complete it and return it.
I think I can do this. I apologize for that. The Crozet master plan was the big discussion for last night. We voted to approve it, and the planning commission had taken a look at it, and I don't know how many of you guys were watching that, keeping track of that, but the bigger issue was that there was a section on Tabor Street and Crozet Avenue with some old Victorian houses which the Planning Commission, the community, and the CAC wanted to remove as a middle density. They just wanted to keep it as is, as residential until the next master plan update, so they could have some more time and discussion. The Planning Commission agreed with that, took it out, but our board put it back in yesterday. So that was the only change. I admit I was the one that voted against it because of that. And my reasoning was that I thought we should have listened to the CAC at that point and gone along with it and just given it another 5 years, because it is the only green space out there really that is part of the old Crozet. But anyway, that got passed in entirety. I think overall the plan is, master plan is been really good and successful. And I think the majority of the people who are involved with it, except for that Tabor Street situation, were pleased with it. The middle density is going to be looked at in all the different master plans. So when master plans get redone for this CAC, I assume that we're going to see middle density in that. And it seems pretty reasonable to me. It gives a lot more flexibility to that. The other stuff that we had last night was pretty, pretty standard stuff, and I don't think really worth having a big discussion about. The big one that we had was the work session with the school board and their need for capacity. And that's going to be a big price tag in the future. They're trying to figure out, and I think we've talked about here all the different schools that are over capacity right now. We know that Mountain View is going to require increase in size. All of our elementary schools are I think them all are undersized. Maybe Stone Robinson, I'm not quite sure, but I think they're all undersized at this point. And that would be a good one to watch if anybody is interested, because it would go through the CIP for the school, although they've got a lot more work to do to get a little more specific. When I go back to the agenda for the first meeting in October, our big one was Breezy Hill. And we did finally approve that with a 4-2 vote. And I guess you guys are all familiar. I think we've had reports. I think Don has updated you guys on Breezy Hill before, but it is that an area that was, it's right on the very periphery of the master plan area, of the development area. And the thought was by the community that that was going to have a lower density. They came in and asked for a rezoning that was quite large. The board did not pass that. They came back with another one. The board didn't pass that. And this one we did pass. I think the big reason why I switched my vote over on this one is because I think that they would have just gone as a by right development, and I don't think we would have gotten the green space and the trails and whatnot that that we would have gotten had we not gone ahead and approved that. But it was obviously much less density than before. I think it was about 80. I should have looked that up, but I think it was about 80 units in there that time. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. Those are the things that are, sort of more meaningful to development area and to the CACs. And we had our comprehensive plan update on how we're doing with that on the whole update. But it was pretty generic too at that point. So any questions at all, or should I go into more detail? Sure,
Andrew.
Sure, just a quick question out of curiosity. Is there an estimate on the amount of potential revenue from the cigarette tax? I saw in the newspaper about the costs associated with administering the tax, but what kind of revenue are you looking at?
I think it's just, I think it's just a little over 500,000. Yeah, that's the assumption for the first year is a little over $500,000. So it's not a big money maker by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, and I think we'll get information back, and we may have already gotten it back, but we're trying to incorporate the equity issue into everything. And our equity department gave us a evaluation of this and said that it was actually going to harm the lower income people more. And also in their report, they said that it really doesn't stop people from smoking. And so basically, why are you doing it? And I asked last night, you know, and I've heard from others that there's information that says that it keeps children from starting smoking, increasing the price. I don't know if we'll get those statistics or not, but we did pass it. And hopefully we'll get a little bit more clarity on the issue, but it's certainly not going to make a lot of money for us. But it will make some, and we are talking about using it to, you know, to help with different programs for smoking cessation.
Anyone else have a question, comment? I'm not seeing any hands. I do have a point of business I wanted to raise with Tori. There was a site review committee memo that came out on September 7th that mentioned a fuel tanks and a canopy at the corner of Avon Street Extended and Avon Court. And I was wondering if that was something that was going to come before us for a review, a CAC review. Do you know anything about that?
I am not familiar with that project offhand, but I can look that up and get back to you all with an email and let you all know for sure.
The language of the site review committee talks about demolition and removal of existing fuel tanks and underground fuel tanks, and then says install new above ground fuel tanks, fuel pumps, and canopy. And I believe that's right across from Tom's property. So I was just curious that could have an impact on that corridor if it's like a gas station canopy.
Yeah, I think it's the city's fuel station there where they have all their operations there. It's back in there. I think they pulled out an underground. I talked to planning probably a week or so ago about it because I thought there was something. We got the notice and there was something I thought was incorrect on it, indicating it was an entrance corridor, and it's not an entrance corridor. It's saying that it was, but I think anytime you're pulling a buried fuel tank out of the ground, that's a good thing. And if it's above ground, then we can all see if it leaks. And they said it wasn't going to be a big deal because you can't see it from 64. That was a remark from someone in planning. So I didn't see there was much substance to the whole thing.
Okay.
Thanks
for the clarification. I was concerned that it might be in the old Volvo repair place.
Yeah, Edgecombs. I thought it was Edgecombs also. I thought they were going to put a gas station in there and they're pulling out a little, but that's not the case. It's a different address.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other new business anyone wants to raise before I make a motion to adjourn? Okay, I move to adjourn. Can I get a second? Okay, I will read this statement. The next CAC meeting is a joint meeting scheduled tentatively for Thursday, November 18th. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted at a later date in accordance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. So I declare this meeting now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.